Everybody. I'm pleased to introduce, on behalf of the United Nations Association of San Francisco, Ms. Hannah Stallard. Ms. Hannah Stallard is an officer at the Drug Control and Crime Prevention Office in New York. Before joining the United Nations in 2018, Ms. Stallard spent 3 years in diplomacy, working as a policy advisor at the New Zealand Embassy. Additionally, Ms. Stallard has experience dealing with crimes with war, genocide, and crimes against humanity, having worked for the Prosecutor General in Rwanda, advising on the transfer of genocide prosecutions from the UN to the domestic judicial system. Ms. Hannah Stallard is a qualified lawyer with over a decade of experience in domestic and international criminal investigations and prosecutions. Ms. Hannah Stallard holds a master's from the University of Cambridge, as well as a bachelor's degree from the University of Canterbury, New Zealand. Thank you, Ms. Hannah Stallard, for accepting our invitation.
Thank you so much, Benjamin, for the introduction, and thanks also to UNASF for the invitation to speak with you all on this really, really important occasion. So today I've been asked to talk about two interrelated crimes, that of trafficking in children and child marriage. So a key message that I would really like to get across is that trafficking occurs in every region of the world, including here in the US. And unfortunately, women and girls continue to be the primary targets. Every 2 years, UNODC produces a global report on trafficking in persons, which looks at trafficking patterns around the world. Our latest 2020 report tells us that children really sadly account for about 1/3 of the detected victims of trafficking globally. Now, this report includes figures from the US. The Department of Justice Office of Victims of Crime reported in 2018 that there were almost 2,000 girl victims of trafficking identified that year, 31 transgender child victims, and close to 5,500 adult women victims. However, we know that these figures are just the tip of the iceberg, as most victims of trafficking are unfortunately never identified. So when I talk about trafficking in persons, what do I mean by that? Trafficking is defined in Article 3 of the UN Trafficking Protocol, and this is the definition on which countries around the world base their national laws. I won't go through it in detail because it's very long, but you can consult the Trafficking Protocol if you are interested in reading the full definition. But trafficking does always involve some sort of recruitment, transfer, or harboring of victims, and it is always for an exploitative purpose. In higher income countries like the US, we see children mainly trafficked for sexual exploitation, as well as for forced begging or forced labor. What we often see is traffickers target children from extremely poor households, from dysfunctional families, or those who may have been abandoned by their parents. Unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic has left societies really vulnerable. Poor socioeconomic conditions are further exploited by traffickers to recruit victims. Women and girls have again been disproportionately targeted. In 2020, 1.6 billion children globally were affected by school closures, which prevented access to education, but also access to shelter and nourishment for many. So in many countries, children have been forced onto the streets in search of food and income, which really heightens their risk of exploitation. In recent years, we have seen the internet and other technology be increasingly used by traffickers to recruit, exploit, and control young victims online. Recent UNODC research shows that during the pandemic, children are being increasingly targeted online by traffickers who use social media and other online platforms to recruit new victims, for example, through fake modeling adverts, offers of friendship, or offers of romance. We commonly see traffickers convince young people to share explicit images, which they then unfortunately use to blackmail them, telling them they'll share images with the victim's friends, family, and their school, unless they submit to online sexual exploitation. So we really encourage everyone of all ages to be wary of being approached by strangers online, particularly with offers that sound too good to be true. The desperation of COVID-19 has also left women and girls at greater risk of forced and child marriages. Globally, 1 in every 5 girls under the age of 18 is married or in a civil union, and that number rises to 40% in least developed countries. Girls and women in poverty, without access to education and employment, are most likely to become victims of forced marriages. All over the world, we see victims of sexual violence forced to marry their abusers. Terrorist groups also use trafficked children as brides to reward male fighters. Once in forced marriages, girls and women are often subjected to physical and sexual violence, forced domestic work, and sometimes even forced participation in crime. Fear of reprisal, stigmatization, shame, losing children, losing homes, losing livelihoods often keep this crime very hidden. There are clear links between trafficking in persons and forced marriage. If you're interested in reading more, we have recently conducted an extensive study which looks at the complicated interrelationship between trafficking and marriage. So what else are we doing at UNODC about trafficking and forced marriage? By way of example, so far in 2021, we have supported 55 countries to build better laws against trafficking, to conduct successful prosecutions, and to train practitioners to ensure solid implementation of the international legal framework, because having protections on paper does not necessarily equate to having them work in practice. We have a global program to end violence against children, which is active in over 40 countries. We also work closely with survivors of trafficking and with NGOs whose efforts are really crucial, especially as victims of trafficking and forced marriages who are often physically and emotionally traumatized, may be most likely to turn first to NGOs for support. UNODC manages the UN Voluntary Trust Fund for victims of trafficking, which assists 5,000 victims a year in over 50 countries. Donations to the trust fund go directly to NGOs working with victims, which is more important than ever, as the pandemic has resulted in funding cuts to NGOs and made it harder for victims to seek help. We also work on tackling the root causes of trafficking and child marriage by empowering girls and women through education, employment, and healthcare. We know that when women and girls can occupy an equal place in society, they are inherently better protected against exploitation and abuse. Increasing women's representation and leadership in law enforcement and the judiciary has been linked to more investigations into crimes against women and girls, better policing outcomes, and successful gender and victim-centered approaches. To put this commitment into action, our office is working with women judges, prosecutors, and law enforcement officers in close to 60 countries. Partnerships and collective action are crucial to combat these crimes. So what can young people do to help? You can raise awareness. You can write blogs and articles to advocate for strict laws and policies. Speak to each other about these topics. Research the signs of trafficking so you can be on the lookout for conversations which might suggest your peers are in exploitative situations themselves. Organizing model UN conferences can be a great way to bring students from multiple disciplines together to learn more about crime prevention. We have the resources to help you with this. Organize hackathons. We need experts in STEM with innovative ideas to equip responders with the knowledge, the skills, and the software to tackle these threats, and to work closely with tech companies to detect and disrupt the misuse of technology by traffickers. UNODC also organizes youth forums, which bring together young people from all around the world to discuss aspects of crime prevention and criminal justice. I really encourage you to join those. For the teachers and academics in the audience, you may wish to consult UNODC's Education for Justice, free online tools and academic resources at primary, secondary and tertiary levels, which cover the rule of law, crime prevention, and criminal justice, including the topics that I've covered today. The Sustainable Development Goals aim to end all forms of violence and harmful practices against women and children by 2030, including trafficking and exploitation, and child and forced marriage. They provide us with a roadmap to strengthen our collective efforts, which go hand in hand with our UN-wide Youth Strategy 2030. However, we are always open to hearing more ideas about what we as the UN can do better. So I look forward to hearing from you during this event and also beyond. Our email address is in my virtual background in case you would like more information about any of the initiatives I have mentioned. Finally, returning to our theme, I call on the young people present to be our living evidence of what life can be like if you are given the opportunities to be in and stay in education. Education is what will shape the values of tomorrow's leaders, reshape societal preferences in a way that respects the rule of law, and empower future generations to tackle our most pressing global crime problems. At the UN, we count on you to help us. Thank you so much.